بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد, dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to this new episode of Ask Zad. The first question of tonight is from Brother Zuhair. And he says, what to do when one makes a mistake or forgets something in mandatory salat behind the imam? Basically, what Zuhair is asking about is, are we supposed to offer sujood as-sahw, the prostration of forgetfulness, when we're praying behind an imam or not? Now, it is important to understand the functions of the salat so that we know when to offer and when not to offer sujood as-sahw. So first of all, among the common mistakes that people frequently ask about is that, do we offer sujood as-sahw when we make a mistake in reciting an ayah after the Fatiha? So if I'm reciting Surah Al-Baqarah and I skip an ayah, or I make a mistake in an ayah, would I rectify this by sujood as-sahw? The answer is no. If I forgot to raise my hands when saying Allahu Akbar, do I have to make sujood as-sahw? The answer is no. Then when to do sujood as-sahw? Sujood as-sahw is done whenever you add or leave out or doubt whether you offered or did not offer a pillar or something that is mandatory in salat. So voluntary acts or sunnah acts in salat do not require sujood as-sahw, whether you've done it intentionally or out of ignorance or out of forgetfulness. You added, you left out a sunnah act or a sunnah rhetoric, this does not affect your salat. So pillars such as standing up, bowing, raising up from bowing, prostrating, sitting between the two prostrations, the tashahhud in the last sitting of the salat, etc. All of these are pillars. If you left them out of ignorance, forgetfulness, or deliberately, your prayer is invalid. You have to rectify it within the prayer itself. Otherwise, there is no pillar, the whole building falls down. If it is a mandatory act, such as saying Allahu Akbar when you move from one position to the other, or saying Sami Allahu liman hamida, or saying Subhana Rabbi al-Azim while you are in the ruku' position, or Subhana Rabbi al-A'la in the prostration position, or the first tashahhud in a prayer that has two tashahhud, like Maghrib or Dhuhr, Asr and Isha. All of these are obligatory or mandatory acts. If you forgot them or left them out or replaced them out of forgetfulness, you rectify this by offering two sujood for sahw. If you had done this intentionally, your prayer is invalid, whether you add or you leave out. Now, let us look at Zuhair's question. Zuhair is asking about leaving out mandatory acts, but while praying behind the imam. So praying behind the imam is or has one of two scenarios. The first scenario is that you join the imam from the first rak'ah. So if he's praying dhuhr, you prayed with the imam the whole 4 rak'ahs. Let us assume that you made a mistake during these 4 rak'ahs by leaving an obligatory or mandatory act, such as in the first rak'ah, while in the bowing position, in the ruku' position, instead of saying Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, you made a mistake and said Subhana Rabbi al-A'la 5 times, 10 times. Or you did not say anything at all. Instead, you started reading or reciting the Fatiha in the ruku'. When the Imam said Sami Allahu liman hamidah, you rose up and said Rabbana wa lakal hamd, and they said, what have I done? I left out an obligatory act. What to do? In scenario number 1, the scholars say that the Imam carries any mistake that you do in obligatory or mandatory acts. And what does that mean? Meaning that if you left out or added something of the voluntary, of the mandatory or obligatory acts, unintentionally or out of forgetfulness or due to ignorance, your prayer is valid and you do not have to rectify it by offering 2 sujood as-sahw. The evidence, the Prophet said alayhi salatu wassalam, al-imamu damin wal-mu'adhdhinu mu'taman, which translates roughly to the Imam is a guarantor, meaning that he guarantees that whatever mistakes you had done in your prayer, he rectifies it, he carries out the burden, and there's nothing on you. And the mu'adhin is entrusted. So when he calls the adhan, it is his responsibility. I don't have to make sure that the adhan is being called on time. Now, in scenario 1, the Imam has the power to exempt you from sujood as-sahw if you had left an obligatory or a mandatory act. But when it comes to pillars, this is not within the authority of the Imam. Meaning that if you offered only 1 sujood with the Imam, because when he made the first sujood, you followed him, you said Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, he said Allahu Akbar and sat between the 2 prostrations, but you didn't. And then he said Allahu Akbar and he prostrated again, and then he stood up for the second rak'ah while you only managed to make 1 sujood. This means that your whole rak'ah is void. Likewise, from the beginning, you started with the Imam. In one of the 4 rak'ahs, while you were standing, you started reciting Surah Al-Baqarah and you forgot to recite Al-Fatiha. It's a silent prayer. So the Imam did not recite it loudly. It's a pillar for you to recite it silently, but you forgot. And you discovered that after the rak'ah was over. This rak'ah is void. It does not count. So when the Imam gives salam, you have to stand up and add an extra rak'ah in place of the one that you had missed. And then after you conclude your prayer and offer salam, you offer 2 sujood of forgetfulness, and then you offer another salam. This was scenario number 1. Now scenario number 2 is that if you join the Imam after skipping 1 rak'ah or more. This means that when the Imam concludes his prayer, you will stand up and complete what you had missed. In this case, you have to complete the prayer as usual, and then before salam or after salam, depending on the mistake you had done, you have to offer sujood as-sahw. Here, the Imam does not carry the burden from you because you did not pray with him from the very beginning. Rather, you missed a rak'ah or more. And I hope this answers your question. Abu Abdurrahman from the UK.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salamtullah.
How are you, Sheikh?
I'm fine. Jazakallah khair for asking.
I have a question and then one suggestion. My question is, what's the best way, if someone wants to learn like fiqh, does he stick to a particular madhab, or because people tend to stick to their madhab. So I don't know, like, what's the ideal way of learning fiqh? And then the second suggestion is...
Yes.
The second is, if it's possible for the channel management to allow WhatsApp calls, maybe, because I don't know. I think it would be cheaper for people.
Okay, I will answer you, inshallah. Alaikum salam wa barakatuh. Abu Abdurrahman from the UK says, what is the best way to learn fiqh? And is it best to follow one single madhab or to do something else? Akhi Abdurrahman, the issue of learning is a very long process. It's hard, it consumes time, it requires efforts and sincerity above all. However, the people, when they learn, they have different ways of learning. Some of them choose a particular school of thought and follow it, while the others say, no, we do not follow schools of thought blindly. We select to choose the Quran, to follow the Quran and the Sunnah, with the understanding of the righteous predecessors of the Salaf, of the three favorite centuries. So which one is most authentic? Well, actually, those who claim to follow the Quran and the Sunnah with the understanding of the righteous predecessors have a problem, and this problem is that they do not possess the necessary tools to understand the Quran and the Sunnah with the understanding of the righteous predecessors. Therefore, the ideal way of learning fiqh would be, and this is what the vast majority of scholars say, it would be that you select a very concise mukhtasar of a particular school of thought. So there are a number of short booklets on the fiqh as a whole of a particular madhab, whether it is Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, or Ahmad ibn Hanbal, depending on the availability of scholars of that particular madhab. So if you are in Morocco, for example, it is difficult to study the school of thought of Imam Ahmad, because the vast majority there are following the Imam Malik school of thought. If you are in Pakistan, usually it is Abu Hanifa. If you are elsewhere, like in some parts of Egypt, it is Imam Shafi'i, and so on. So it is best for you to select one trustworthy sheikh or alim, or a highly decorated student of knowledge, and you study with him this concise booklet of fiqh according to a particular madhab. So you are actually getting a preliminary idea of the whole jurisprudence system, the sharia, the fiqh, through one school of thought. And the rate of accuracy in that particular school of thought is 85 to 90%. And this is almost the same in all schools of thought, that they are 85 to 90% correct. 10 to 15%, the opinion they've adopted is weak and not the most authentic. Once you finish this, you go to a more advanced book of fiqh on the same topic. So now you have a very, very good idea about the sharia, about the fiqh as a whole, from two authentic, two reliable sources of a school of thought. Once you finish that, now it is time for you to study the fiqh a third time according to the Quran and the Sunnah. Now you have an idea. So when the teacher tells you that the madhab says so and so and so, but the evidences they depended upon are all weak and not authentic. And the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, so and so and so, and this hadith is reported in Bukhari or in Muslim or in Sunnah Ibn Majah, and it is graded as authentic. So now you relate things and you base your learning on the Quran and the Sunnah after you had done your due diligence, after you had read the whole fiqh according to a particular school of thought. This enriches your knowledge. It lays the foundation for a systematic way of thinking and learning how to analyze things from studying fiqh. And it is extremely important that this is done at the hands of a sheikh. You cannot be a Rambo on your own and say, oh, I have the tools, I can bring the books, I have Sheikh Google, I have the internet, I can browse, and I'm a logical person, I can find the right thing. No, this is wrong. You have to have a sheikh to refer to ask, to fix the way you think. Because in the beginning, when you learn, you tend to make a lot, and I mean a lot, of mistakes. We all had gone through this in the early stages of learning, when thoughts used to come to us and, wow, this doesn't make any sense. Why is gold haram for men and not other precious stones that are far more expensive than gold? And we started to give justifications and things that I remember once calling one of the elders, one of the scholars. That was like 35 years ago or so. And I told him, Sheikh, because gold is haram for men, can we do qiyas, analogy, and say that diamonds are also haram for men because they are more expensive? And the guy blasted at me at the phone. And he said, who are you to make such an analogy? Analogy has men and has scholars to obtain the knowledge and to look into the evidences, not for any Tom, Dick, and Harry to just come and pass by and read a book or two and become scholars. And I, since then, I learned my lesson. Always refer to the elders, to the scholars. Share with them your experience. Tell them, I thought that this issue could go either north or south. And these are my reasons. What do you say, Sheikh? And the scholar, with his scholarly knowledge, would tell you that, no, the first opinion is wrong because it was based on so and so and so, and this is wrong. The right approach would be so and so and so. And then you can expand your knowledge through asking shuyukh and scholars, not through being your own Rambo. His second question is to the administration of the channels. Usually, can you accept WhatsApp calls? Here in Saudi Arabia, WhatsApp calls are restricted, like in the United Arab Emirates. They have restricted WhatsApp calls, but I think that you can use Skype, but I don't know if Skype is operating or not. So unfortunately, the only means of doing so is either to call directly by phone call or to send me a mail on my website, and then if it is appropriate, we will have it on the show, inshallah. Zain says, what do you recite behind the imam in a silent prayer and in a loud prayer? In a silent prayer, there is no ambiguity. You have to recite Surah Al-Fatiha in each and every rak'ah as it's a pillar for you, as a follower. And afterwards, you recite whatever you wish from the Quran. As long as the imam is still standing, you don't sit there just listening. There's no one to nothing to listen to. You have to recite whatever you can from the Quran. In loud rak'ahs, like the first 2 rak'ahs of Fajr, of Maghrib, of Isha, you can only recite the Fatiha and nothing at all else. I'm talking about the Quran. Of course, the inauguration dua, dua al-istiftah, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, bismillahir rahmanir rahim, this is by default in the first rak'ah. But I'm talking about the Quran, you only recite al-Fatiha in loud prayers and nothing else. Asif from India.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.
Salamullah.
Yes, sir. I have one question.
Yes, sir.
If my son or daughter is going to her maternal grandfather, actually we are staying in a city, and if my kids go to their maternal grandfather for a week or two, so during this they will shorten their prayer or they will offer complete salah? That is the question.
It's in a different city?
Yeah, different part of the city.
Okay.
Yeah, different city actually, around 1,000 kilometers, more than 1,000 kilometers.
Okay, any more questions?
No, Jazakallah khair.
Wajazak. Asif Bai says that if my children go to their grandparents, and it doesn't matter whether it's paternal grandparent or maternal, it doesn't matter if they are your children or it's your wife, it doesn't matter if it's you going to a friend or a relative. The concept is a person is traveling to another city that is not his hometown. Does he shorten and combine the prayers? The answer is yes. Because this is a permission from Allah Azza wa Jal to us that whenever we travel away from our home cities, that we shorten prayers, and if needed, we can also combine Dhuhr to Asr or Asr to Dhuhr, and Maghrib to Isha or Isha to Maghrib. And this is for according to our convenience. Alhamdulillah. And for how long? The answer is as long as you're described as a traveler. So if I go to another city for a week, 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 weeks, I'm a traveler. I'm moving from one hotel room to the other, from one house to the other. I'm staying in a house that is not mine. Then I shorten. But if I go for a long course, if I go to do my master's for a year or 2, after 4 or 5 weeks, getting my own flat furnished, I live in it, it becomes like a home, I'm settled, then I have to complete my prayers and pray it on time. We have a short break, stay tuned, and inshallah, we'll be right back.
Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I'm going to talk about the book Interactions of the Greatest Leader. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam reminded us through his guidance and example that Islam is complete submission to the will of Allah. For one who submits, a mere declaration or display of belief will not be taken for success, but his or her heart and soul will certainly be put to test. Allah tested the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam severely in order that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam becomes an example for his companions to follow. Similarly, he tests the believer to see whether he lives a righteous life in accordance with the instructions and commands set by Allah, or lives according to what his desires dictate. Whether the faith he displays is firmly rooted in his heart, or is it merely on the surface. He will be tested to see whether he will continue to have faith and love of Allah when in a calamity, as he does when in comfort, whether he will continue to remember and worship him if given bounties and comforts of life, as he does when he lives a modest life. Allah will undoubtedly test him to see if his faith, trust and love of him is unconditional, or is it conditioned upon good health and a comfortable life, free from stress and anxiety. The Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam showed us through his own example that for a righteous Muslim, this life is a testing ground where he will continue to be tested. until he meets Allah. For him, tests will be conducted on earth while he lives, and not after he dies. He knows that as soon as death arrives and he steps into the next world, his tests are over. There, he only receives the result of his tests and enjoys the fruits of the deeds that he committed during a short span of time called life.
Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and welcome back. Abu Abdurrahman says, how should I control my nafs? This is a very generic question. How do I control my soul, myself? And why would you want to control yourself or your soul? Usually this is asked when a person loses control, either by doing sins or by abandoning mandatory acts. And he wants to put a stop to that. First of all, in order to control your soul, you need to seek refuge in Allah Azza wa Jal and ask Him for assistance. You ask Allah for assistance because the Prophet used to say, alayhi salatu wasalam, Ya Hayyu wa Qayyum, bi rahmatika astaghith. And he used to call Allah by His beautiful names and attributes and seek refuge in His mercy, that Allah does not let him to himself. So many times people say, you can make a difference. You convince yourself that you're able to do this. You are strong and no one can put you down. You are the man. And they encourage you to depend on yourself rather than directing you to depend on Allah Azza wa Jalla. And this is a serious offense. We are unable to take and inhale a breath without Allah's permission. So when you tell someone, and I met one of the da'is who had leukemia, and he said that I managed to recover from leukemia by self-convincing. And I trained myself, and I did tell myself that you'll get over it, you have the power, and I kept on doing this until it's gone. And I was shocked. You're a da'i. What are you calling people to? To tawheed? This is not tawheed. You're asking them to depend on themselves. Yes, you have to depend 100% on Allah Azza wa Jal, but also do the necessary means to get your healing process ongoing while depending on Allah, not by depending on yourself and believing in yourself and thinking that your breathing pattern would give you strength and power, and you neglect Allah Azza wa Jal altogether. This is wrong. So you have to ask Allah Azza wa Jal to assist you and to help you and to support you, rather than let you be your own judge and be the one in control. Give your control to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to also, in order to harness your self, whether evil or good, you have to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. And once you manage to follow the Quran and the Sunnah to the letter, you have to do this while submitting your own will to Allah. So you don't try to logic things. Allah said, do this, you do it. You don't say, what is the wisdom? Show me the justification for that. No, Allah told you to do something. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited you from doing something. You adhere and say, sami'na wa ata'na. You have no other option. We obey and we hear and listen. So by submitting your will to Allah, following the Quran, the Sunnah, and by reading the biography of the Prophet ﷺ. If you read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, you get a lot of power from Allah Azza wa Jal to control yourself and to compare your life to the life of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions by going through the life stories of the Salaf, of the scholars, of the righteous predecessors. Such type of biographies and life stories would strengthen your iman and give you a boost to control yourself and evil thoughts. And finally, among the things that would help you control yourself is to look at the consequences. It is fun to play around, to neglect salat, to go out with the boys and party all night long. It is fun to indulge in sins and to live the life of celebrities without any fear of the day of judgment. But it is not as much fun as you think when you think of what's awaiting you. If you are in a race car, in a sports car, a fancy Porsche or a Lamborghini, and you go from 0 to 100 in 3.4 seconds, and you do your quarter mile in 11 seconds, and you do like 300 kilometers in so much or so many or so little seconds, it's fun. The adrenaline is pumping in your veins. It's a beautiful feeling. But when you think of the people you might kill or injure, or the accidents you can do, when you think of the fine you have to pay or the jail time you have to spend, the lives you might destroy, it would make this beautiful feeling fade away. Likewise, if you see a nice sandwich and it is tasty, smells good, filled with lots of good things, but you know that there's poison in it. All these nice looking, nice smelling, and nice tasting would become detestful for you, and you would not like to touch it because you know the consequence of it. And likewise, when you give your soul and you unleash it, you give it whatever it wants and desires. If you think of the consequences of the punishment in the grave, of the punishment in hellfire, and before that, the exposure of your sins to the people and they know you, the shame you feel after you're exposed, such feelings gives you a lot of control with the grace of Allah upon yourself, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Muhammad from Saudi Arabia.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. How are you?
Salam wa barakatuh.
Sheikh, nice to hear from you, and it is a pleasure to talk to you. And please dua for me, family, and the whole Muslims, Sheikh, that Allah Kabul do it also, Sheikh.
Barakallah feek, Muhammad. What can I do for you?
Sheikh, one question. You know, I used to, I've been called by the Tablighi Jamaat. They used to call us, to go with them and to study them. But when I looked at some of the parts, it looks, a little bit addition. I don't know whether it is correct or not. I'm not sure whether. What about your opinion, Sheikh, regarding Tablighi Jamaat?
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Brother Muhammad is asking about the Tablighi Jama'ah, and everybody knows that Tablighi Jama'ah is one of the large groups of Muslims who are widely spread in the subcontinent. So India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and they have their annual convention in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, if I'm not mistaken. They have a lot of things that are good, and they have a lot of things that are bad. So they are the kindest of the groups. They're peaceful, they're very generous, they're nice, easygoing people. I know a lot of them, and they used to visit me in my home, and we used to talk. They're very kind, very generous. They abide by a lot of the Sunnah. such as growing the beard, shortening the thobe, using the miswak, observing salat in the masjid, reciting the Quran, making dhikr. All of these things are beautiful in them. However, they have a lot of innovated things, like their 6 usul, depending on Tablighi Nisab, the book, and Fazail al-A'mal, which is filled of innovative and fabricated and weak hadiths. They depend on their self-seclusion with the group. So it is a form of Sufism, where they tend to travel for 3 days a week, 10 days, 40 days, and they go from one place to the other, usually stay at masjids, eat together, sleep together, go visitation between Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib, or Maghrib and Isha, knocking doors of Muslims, inviting them to come to the masjid, making dhikr. They have also the bayan, where people after Fajr stand up and say that I did so and so and so yesterday and this happened to me. And some of it is true and some of it is fabricated, or they tend to lie sometimes in order to draw people to join them. But this is not the norm, but I've seen this. So in essence, they have a lot of good in them, but they don't promote jihad. They do not promote scientific circles of knowledge, because they think that this fuels dispute, whether this is halal or haram. So they refrain from learning a lot of the knowledge, and that is why you don't find a lot of academics among them. And if you listen to their leaders, all of their tales and hadiths, the vast majority of it are fabricated. They have no knowledge in Sharia, yet they speak, and they're storytellers. In short, as people, they are good. If they visit you, welcome them in, give them food, talk to them, try to draw them a little bit to the Sunnah as much as possible. Going out with them is totally not recommended, except for those who have knowledge. So if you are a highly decorated student of knowledge and they're willing to listen to you and they invite you to go with them for 3 days, go. In these 3 days, give them da'wah. Infuse them with knowledge of following the Sunnah, of the correct aqeedah, of submitting their will to Allah, not to their leadership. And if you succeed in that, that's a lot of good, insha'Allah Azza wa Jalla. Allah knows best. Mehwish says, is it permissible to pay a bribe in order to get one's right? Have some work to get done with one of the government departments, and if the official does not take a bribe, he will cause trouble for me. Is it permissible for me to give him a bribe? First of all, bribery is a major sin in Islam. The Prophet said in an authentic hadith, alayhi salatu wassalam, may Allah curse the one who pays the bribe and the one who receives it. لَعَنَ اللَّهُ الرَّاشِيَ وَالْمُرْتَشِي. It's an authentic hadith, no doubt about it. And it is totally prohibited to deal with it. If you look at a society, if you look at a country that bribery is widely spread in it, you will find it one of the worst countries in the world. You will find it at the very bottom of the scale of the civilized countries. And this is obvious. You go to some countries and nothing goes through without bribing. You bribe the officials, you bribe the judges, you bribe the police, you bribe the governor, you bribe everyone. And anyone who holds a public office becomes rich within a couple of weeks because of this. So bribery is an epidemic that destroys the community. Now my question is, if I am forced to do it, what do you mean you're forced to do it? He says, there is a tender that people are bidding to get for constructing a building for the government. If I do not pay a bribe, I may not get a chance to join in. Well, this is not a necessity. Said, Sheikh, I have to work. I have to get jobs. Said, yes, but instead of dealing in construction, buy a car and work as a taxi or as an Uber or as a whatever. This is not a necessity because there are others who are in the same boat. And what you're doing is you are taking someone's share because of the bribe you're giving. So the higher the bribe is, the more possibility of you getting the job. And this is not your right. So what should I do? When is it okay for me to pay a bribe? Scholars say that it is permissible for you to pay a bribe when you require and you need to obtain what is lawfully yours, or to protect yourself and prevent yourself from any form of aggression or dhulm. For example, I bought a car from Europe, I shipped it to my country, all the paperworks are okay, and the law has been followed. When the what do you call a customs officer. When the customs officer came, he looked in the papers and said, you have to ship your car back again. Why? It doesn't fall under the categories permitted to enter. Show me something, I won't show you anything. I went to his boss is as corrupt as he is. If you don't pay us so much money, we will not get the car in. This is my car. I paid my own money. I did not break any laws. What to do? Scholars say in this case, give them the bribe. It is haram for them. They will eat equivalent amount of it in hellfire through their stomachs without any doubt. As for you, you are not sinful for what you had done because you wanted to get what is lawfully yours. Likewise, if someone wanting to inflict harm to me or to my family by saying that the house you live in is not good for human, not consumption, for human standards. So you have to vacate your house and we will destroy it and demolish it, and you can build some other house on the land. I said, why? The guy says, because I said so. What are you going to do about it? You go to the governor, you go to the officials, and no one is listening to you. He said, you have to follow the law. But the law is doing injustice to me. There's nothing wrong in the house. He said, well, he's the one in charge. So it's obvious that he wants harm for me. And I cannot repel and push back this harm without giving him a bribe. Islam says, give him the bribe, and he will consume it in hellfire on the day of judgment. So this is the scenario that allows you to give a bribe. But in other cases where it is uncalled for and it's not a necessity and it's not to take what is lawfully yours or to prevent harm from coming onto you, then you will be as sinful as they are. Abu Yusuf from Saudi.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sorry, I'm to call late. My phone was not working. I'm sorry.
Better late than never.
Never mind. Thank you. Thank you. My teenage daughter would like to visit her brother in Riyadh from Jeddah. She wants to go alone by flight. She said, I have no mahram. Myself is here, and her brother is very busy in the job in Jeddah. And
okay. Any more questions?
Another question is, she asked for permission whether she can travel alone or not. The second question is, some of the relatives in our city in India were expired. One relative expired. Their kids were in UK. So the janaza prayer were offered, everything. They kept the body in the masjid, in the cellar of the masjid. So until the flight arrives after maybe 4 hours, 3 hours, I don't know. They came, the two girls, two daughters, to view her face, mother's face. Then they took her for the burial. This is permitted for the after the janaza, everything done, they open the, clothes and all the thing, everything. So this is done. One more, third question is, some of the other relatives expired. Those people, the family, they did not inform others. They just quietly want to bury their relatives and all that, So they don't want to inform the others. I just don't know what's the problem with them. That's all.
Okay, I will answer inshallah.
I appreciate. Sorry.
Barakallah fiqh. Abu Yusuf from Saudi Arabia says that his daughter, teenage, wants to go from Riyadh to Jeddah to visit her brother. Can she travel alone in an airplane? He will drop her to the airport and her brother would receive her once she arrives in Jeddah airport. So it's only the flight, which is about an hour flight. Is that okay? Well, the most adequate and suitable person to answer your question would be the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is not permissible for a woman who believes in Allah and the Day of Judgment to travel without a mahram. Ask your daughter, when you're on the plane from Riyadh to Jeddah, are you traveling or not? If she says yes, then the Prophet has answered her, and this is totally not permissible. His second question was about a woman who died in India, and they washed her, they offered janazah prayer, and they postponed the burial for 2 to 3 hours until her daughters or children come from the UK to see their mother for the last time. So is that permissible? If the delay is minimal, there's no problem. Delaying the burial for a day or two for a legitimate reason, such as for the children to come and see their mother or their father or their loved one, this seems permissible, providing that the body does not change and providing that the period is short. But processing the burial and doing it as soon as possible is far greater and better for the deceased. Because if it's a good soul, it will tell the mourners, the family, quickly take me to what awaits for me. And if it's a bad soul, they should get rid of it and bury it and be done with that. So inshallah, a few hours is not a problem. His third and last question was about a family. If one of their members die, they are reluctant in telling other relatives about his death. So they hush things and they wash, shroud, offer prayer of janazah, and they bury their deceased without informing others. And this is awkward because most likely they have grudges in their hearts towards their relatives whom they do not want them to participate in the last thing that would ever happen to the deceased before his burial. So it is hatred, it's envy, you call it whatever you want to call it. And this is wrong and this is sinful. The deceased is in need for as many people asking Allah for him for forgiveness now than any other time. And by you depriving him from this privilege, you are doing him harm. And you have ill intent against everyone else, and you will be dealt with in the same fashion when you are in most need of Allah's mercy. May Allah Azza wa Jal have mercy on us all. We have one more minute. Imran says, I was praying Dhuhr and I was on my own in my third rak'ah. I was late, so I missed the congregation. While I was in my third rak'ah, 2 men came and started to pray in their own congregation. What to do? Well, because you have already prayed 3 rak'ahs and you have 1 rak'ah left, then you continue your rak'ah and complete your prayer without thinking about them. But if you were in the first rak'ah, for example, I would have told you, conclude 2 rak'ahs as sunnah, as voluntary, change your intention, conclude it, and then join them. But because you have gone more than 75% into your dhuhr prayer, you complete the prayer and pray it, and inshallah you'll be rewarded for that. Nu'man says, what is the procedure to take back a wife? Well, this needs a lot of explaining, and I'm afraid that we don't have time for this. Maybe we'll make this question, inshallah, the first question we answer next time we meet. Until then, I leave you fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.